Welcome back to our channel, folks. In this video, we're looking at the three main carbonation options for your homebrew. This video is aimed at fairly new homebrewers and those just starting out. So we're going to look at some of the basics of each, some pros and cons, and of course the costs.
Oh yeah.
Carbonating is also often referred to as priming, conditioning, and secondary fermentation. There are links below where you can buy everything we discuss in this video. Before we dive in, let's just mention the two broad types of carbonating. There's natural carbonating and there's forced carbonating. Now, with natural carbonation, the yeast converts the sugar into CO2, much like during fermentation, but the CO2 can't escape, so it is absorbed by the beer instead. And this is how our beautiful British cask beers are carbonated, and also how virtually every home brewer starts.
Holy cow, did you hear that? That's got so much carbonation it busted my lid off.
With forced carbonation, you inject CO2 into the beer from a cylinder and you force it to carbonate. Other than the bottles and the kegs themselves, there is some fairly cheap kit that will really help you out. First of all, we have Sanitiser. Now, you can't get enough of this stuff, and you need to thoroughly sanitize everything that touches your beer post-fermentation. Next up, we have some micro scales. And why? Well, just try measuring out 1.2 grams of sugar on your kitchen scales and see how that works out for you. Some Vaseline, now we'll come on to that later on. You'll need a siphon. There are various different types. This one has a hand pump, so it's pretty easy to use. And finally, get yourself a decent Dextrose dealer.
It's Dextrose, honestly, Gov.
Dextrose is 100% fermentable and flavourless. You can use regular sugar if you wish. We've had success with honey also. Brooklyn Brew Shop kits suggest using honey, and just under a level tablespoon per litre. Honey is 82% sugar, so this equates to roughly 4.5 grams a litre, which is at the upper end of what we recommend. Bottles are great. They're traditional, they look the part, you can drink one at a time, you can store them easily and give them to friends. The term bottle conditioning sounds pretty good too. In our experience, bottles are a little bit hit and miss because they're prone to leaks. If CO2 escapes, then your beer is basically shagged. We've tried swing tops, as you can see here. We've also tried conventional bottles needing a bottle capper, but swing tops get our vote for ease. Just be aware, we have had some bad batches from Amazon and a couple of other sources too. The style with a rubber ring, i.e. like that, seemed to be a bit more reliable than that style there. Also, the one with the ring, the stopper seems to be ceramic, whereas that one is plastic. As you can see, they're brown. Now, brown bottles are best to keep the light out and avoid the off flavour known as skunkiness. Downsides, glass of course breaks. You can buy plastic bottles, but pouring beer out of a plastic bottle doesn't feel right unless you live on a park bench. The rule of thumb is half a teaspoon of sugar per bottle. This is a good beginner benchmark for 330ml and 500ml bottles. But a closer look suggests 1/4 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon for a 500ml bottle, depending on the beer style. Now, broadly, British ales and stouts are at the lower to mid end of that scale. American ales and all styles of lager are in the middle ground, through to Belgian beers and German wheat beers at the upper end. Now, your friends at Brew Bros favour Carbonation Drops. We're basically idiots, so we like simplicity. And the simple ratio of 1 per 330ml bottle and 1 to 2 in a 500ml bottle is nice and easy for our little minds to grasp. 1 for British ales and stouts, 1.5 if you can split them in two, 1.5 to 2 for American ales or lagers, and 2 for Belgian and wheat beers. There are two ways to attack it. You can either place your sugar directly in the bottles and siphon the beer in, or you can do what's called batch priming, where you put the sugar or honey, whatever you're using, in a bucket or pot, and then you add the beer in so it can mix before you then bottle. Don't just pour the beer in when bottling and splash it all over the place willy-nilly, because you'll introduce oxygen. Be sure to either siphon or use a bottling wand and fill from the bottom up. Once bottled, spray sanitizer on the lid and store in a dark place around the same temperature that you fermented at for at least 2 weeks. Pressure barrels and mini kegs work in much the same way as a bottle. The process is the same, just on a bigger scale. You need to sanitize just the one vessel, so it is quicker and easier than bottling. But because of the size, you'll need to drink quickly, because once tapped and oxygen has got in, it will be drinkable for 3 to 4 days max before it's only really good for putting on chips. The most popular size is 25 litres, but you can get 10 litres too. Something to look out for is the seals on the pressure barrels. It's good to ensure you lubricate both the seal on the cap with a little Vaseline or similar, and also the O-ring that the tap sits on. This prevents them from becoming brittle and also allows the tap to be screwed on tight and avoid any unwanted leakage of CO2 or beer. With 25 litre barrels, the guide is 50 grams to 100 grams of sugar. We generally use barrels for cask style beers at the low end of this scale, around the sort of 50 gram mark, 55 gram. And that gives a nice gentle carbonation level and creamy head. Check out our Doom Bar video here. We're big users of mini kegs because they only hold 5 litres, they're really easy to use and refrigerate, they're portable, quite sturdy, but also cheap. And you can use them multiple times. There's various videos which we'll link to below where you can recycle them and how you can reuse the stopper at the top, because that is the key. With mini kegs, you need 12 to 18 grams of dextrose. Any more than 20 grams and you're on dodgy ground. We heard of someone priming a keg with honey, but he didn't look up the sugar equivalent and ended up putting 80 grams worth in there. So yeah, about 4 times more than he should have done, and then he later wondered why it made a hell of a mess of his garage. As with the bottles, once barreled or kegged, you store it somewhere dark around the same temperature you fermented at for at least 2 weeks. CORNY kegging. Now we're in the realm of forced carbonation, baby. We're going to do a couple of in-depth videos on kegging soon, so this is really just to tickle your pickle. CORNY kegs get their name from the company that first manufactured them, Cornelius. They are most commonly 19 litre capacity, although there are smaller variants. They are stainless steel and feature hardware that is ideally suited to home brewing. Be aware though that not all CORNY kegs are created equal. The Italian AEB kegs are best in our opinion. We also hear good things about Kegland. You can buy them new or reconditioned from reputable companies like Malt Miller. Issues to look for in cheaper and reconditioned kegs is the lid not seating properly and leaks from the 2 posts, the beer post and the gas post. Generally they're fine, but if air can escape, big problemo. We've lost a very expensively hopped dipper in the past to keg leakage, and it wasn't pretty. We almost exclusively keg now for 3 main reasons. 1, it gives us precise control over carbonation levels, so if we want to carbonate a New England IPA at 2.6 CO2 volumes, then that's exactly what we'll do. Let's just go and visit Andrew and see what he's got to say about CO2 volumes.
So CO2 is usually given in volumes. A volume is a space that CO2 would take up at standard pressure and temperature, which is 1 atmosphere and 0 degrees Celsius. So if you had 20 litres of beer and it was carbonated at 3 volumes of CO2, you would have 60 litres of CO2 in it, so 3 times the 20 litres of beer. So if you had 1 litre, you would have 3 litres of CO2 in that 1 litre of beer. Cask ale stouts and porters are generally carbonated at 1.5 to 2.2 volumes of CO2. Lagers, ales, ambers, most of your general beers, IPAs, NEPAs, generally sit between 2.2 and 2.6 volumes of CO2. Any highly carbonated ales, lambics and wheat beers, they would sit between 2.6 and 4. And you don't generally, and most beers are classed as over-carbonated if they go above 4, but there are probably some specialty ones. And they're just guidelines as well, they're not hard and fast rules. 2, it's the best way to store beer because once transferred, the beer is securely cocooned in an oxygen-free metal fortress. And 3, draft beer is awesome.
transferring to keg via siphon is the simplest way, but be aware that with the right fermenter, you can do what's called a closed transfer, where the beer is never exposed to oxygen. It's transferred under pressure via a pipe. Bloody tops. You don't necessarily need to have a keezer set up or taps like we've mounted behind here. You can get by with literally just a single keg, a regulator, the tubing, and a party tap. By kegging and forced carbonating, you can carbonate quicker, even overnight. Also, kegging is the key in the door to canning your homebrew. And although there's nothing like capping on foam and giving friends a can of your suds, it is pricey. Feel free to geek out as much as you want on our favourite carbonation level charts and calculators, which we'll put in the description. So that covers the 3 ways to carbonate your homebrew. There are probably other ways you can do it, other wacky and weird ways, and other gadgets you can introduce, things like beer guns and so on. There's loads of hacks, as there is in all aspects of homebrewing. For example, I was on the Harry Brew 69 channel last night. It's a great channel. He was force carbonating in a plastic bottle using a tyre valve and tyre pump. So there we have it, team. Hope that's been of some use. Feel free to comment below with the ways that you carbonate and the lessons that you've learned. And we look forward to reading those. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you guys in the brew shed soon.